I don't normally showcase books that I didn't enjoy, but I feel like being a hater, so here we are. Hi everyone, I'm Emma, aka Chaotic Book Gremlin, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my best and worst reads of 2024. I read 76 books in 2024, and some of those have been like some of the best that I've ever read, and others have been among the worst that I've read. And in past years, I don't really have enough reads that are below a 3-star in order to like showcase them all like this. However, I changed my rating system in 2024, so now I have plenty of options to choose from. I'm gonna start out with the negatives so we can end all this reading wrap-up stuff on a positive note. So firstly, here are the 5 worst books that I read in 2024. In 5th place at a 2.75 star is A Song of Raisin Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. I read this in June for my TBR takeover, where I was randomly pulling books out of my TBR jar for the entire month, so I was actually kind of forced to read this. I mean, I guess I kind of had some involvement because I did have to buy the book in order to have it be put into the jar. And obviously I was interested enough in this book to buy it in the first place. However, that is part of the problem. For a bit of context on what this book is about, this is a YA fantasy that I think is the first in a duology, and it follows 2 main POV characters. So the story mainly takes place in the city of Zeron during their big Solstacia festival. And for Malik, this festival becomes an opportunity for him to escape his war-torn home and find a new home for his family, but then upon like minutes after arriving in the city, his sister is abducted by this weird demonic ghosty creature thing, and he's blackmailed into getting her back. To get his sister back, he has to, you know, kill the crown princess. Easy stuff. Nothing could possibly grow complicated from that. Meanwhile, Princess Karina has her own problems going on because, you know, her mother just died. In the aftermath of the do you mind? And in the aftermath of this, her court threatens mutiny and tries to seize power from her, and she is consumed by grief for her mother. So naturally, she decides that the best course of action is to try to resurrect her, because necromancy never goes wrong. However, a key ingredient for the resurrection ritual is the literal beating heart of a king, something she does not have. So she decides to offer her hand in marriage as the prize for the victor of the Solstacia competition. And obviously, no one knows her true intentions behind this, so Malik decides this is a good way to get close to the princess in order to kill her, and rigs his way into the competition. And that sounds really interesting, right? And definitely something I probably would have enjoyed. Except that the book is nothing like that. Based off that description, I get vibes of like enemies to lovers, forced proximity, I have to kill you but I don't want to kind of thing. Would never guess that this book actually has an insta-love plot. And that's my least favorite trope ever. There are very, very few books that I have read in which the insta-love didn't bother me. And then my other big problem from this book, other than that the characters were like all boring and the story wasn't anything special and everything was just kind of like, feels like I've read it before kind of thing, like it wasn't anything new. We spent 300 pages building up towards this big climatic moment, and then at the last minute, the characters changed their mind and decided, we're gonna do something else. And I'm like, why? What were the last 300 pages for? Why did I read all of this to have no payoff? It was very frustrating, and I think it's safe to say that I will not be continuing on with the series. However, I did read worse. In 4th place at what I initially gave a 2.75, but I'm probably more down to a 2.5 now, is The Mars House by Natasha Pulley. This is a standalone sci-fi romance, and I don't remember any of the characters' names, so just bear with me on this. So based off of what I remember, which is not very much, I read this back in February, and like I was not really interested in this book, so like a lot of it just fell out of my brain the second I finished it. The main character, who's from Earth, immigrates to the human colonies on Mars after his city is destroyed by flooding because of climate change. And on Mars, the people who are from Earth are known as Earth Strong because they are like so much stronger than the people who were like born and raised on Mars, because they haven't adapted to the difference in gravity between the 2 planets. So because Earth's gravity is so much stronger than that of Mars, they are significantly stronger than the people who are on Mars because there's like less resistance, if that makes sense. There's the Mars-born politician who is very vocal about their dislike of the Earth-strong people. However, there's a big election coming up and they need people to like them. So naturally they enter into a fake engagement with an Earth-strong person who just so happens to be our main character. I think there was more context leading up to that, but I don't remember any of it. I think it's also important to note that our main character, you know, being Earth-strong, does not like this politician. So based off that, I think you would also get vibes of like enemies to lovers, forced engagement kind of thing. Fun stuff. And again, I got insta-love vibes instead. I can't win with these books. And when he's alone, our main character's kind of like hating on the politician, like, oh, they're the worst, like I don't like them. But then when they're together, they're just kind of like, I don't know, like fluffy and happy, and I don't get it. However, my biggest problem with this book was with the world building, and if you know anything about me, you'll know that I love good world building. Like the first couple hundred pages of books like Power of the Orange Tree was just like names and places and history and stuff being thrown at you. I fucking love it. When it makes sense. I was so distracted for most of this book because so many of my questions on the terraforming of Mars were not answered. Like, how do they fucking breathe? Like for most of the book, I was imagining them kind of living in like a domed city. Like I was kind of picturing like the cities on Mandalore from the Star Wars universe. However, not only is there no mention of this, they also talk about the wind and the weather, and I don't get it. How are you breathing on this planet that virtually has no atmosphere? It was very annoying. So I was too distracted by that question for most of the book to enjoy it in any way, and even if that question was answered, I didn't notice it, so it wasn't obvious enough apparently. I'm annoyed. In 3rd place at a definite at 2.5, maybe a 2.25, is The Once and Future Witches by Alex Harrow. Now I've read one other book by Alex C. Harrow, and it was Starling House, and I didn't mind that. It was okay. And I was initially really excited to read this. This book follows the three Eastwood sisters in 1893 in the city of New Salem as they join the women's suffrage movement and try to find ways to turn it into the witches' suffrage movement. And naturally, the men don't like that. And at this point in time, witchcraft is all but extinct, and all the spells and stuff really only exist in like nursery rhymes and stuff, which I do think is a really cool way to like hide spells. However, in order to be successful, the sisters will need to hunt down even older forms of magic that have been hidden from the world for centuries. This book was so fucking boring. It seemed like something I was really going to enjoy. I was so excited to read this. Like, it's about like women's rights and like women's suffrage, and it also has like story within story stuff, which I fucking love. I think the writing style was just really bland and dry and just didn't invoke really anything in me. But yeah, I just didn't care for this. In second place, dropping down to a 1.75 star, is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. This fucking sucked. This book is about like 6 magical people who were like tops of their classes who were chosen by the Alexandrian Society to be integrated into their like group. It's a cult. So our 6 candidates are recruited, and they are told they have 1 year to prove their worth to the society, and one of them will not make it through. This has heavy dark academia vibes. It really focuses on like the academic nature of magic, and this is also one of the worst books that I've ever read. I have maybe like 3 books in total that I've rated below a 2-star, and this is one of them. So like, a really big thing that annoyed me with this book was, again, the world building. It was not explained at all. Like, for most of this book, I was really trying to figure out what like the magic system was. Is there even a magic system? That is heavily debatable, because I don't think there's a magic system. It's like these people have these powers for whatever reason, and there's like no correlation or anything. Like, their powers are so wildly different from each other that there just seems to be like, I don't know, like there's no consistency. It's annoying. And also, like, every single character just felt like the exact same person, just in a different font. Like, they were all just varying degrees of pretentious and bland. Those are not the kind of academics that I like, and I'm a literature major. And like, nothing fucking happened for like 90% of this book, and then in like the last 20 pages, like there was a whole rush of events happening, but at that point I just wanted the book to be over, so I didn't care. I remember when I pulled this book into the TBR jar in June that I was really worried that I was actually going to like this book and that I would have to buy the rest of the series in the traditionally published copies, because this is a self-published edition. This isn't made anymore. This is out of print. The other copies are completely different from this one. I guess I don't have to worry about that now, because I will not be continuing on with the series. And then by a landslide, the worst book that I've read all year, which also happens to be the worst book that I've ever read, is King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair. This book is a day of my life that I will never get back. Essentially, this book takes place around like a centuries-long war between like the vampires and the humans, and the vampires are like conquesting all the human lands. The vampire king Adrian is going to Princess Isolde's kingdom. However, Adrian comes to Isolde's father with a proposal that if Isolde marries him, then he will leave their kingdom alone. Her father agrees, and then later tells Isolde that she is to marry him and then she's to kill him. So then he won't be a problem at all anymore. But then obviously that doesn't happen. Why? Because of the fucking insta-love trope. She meets him, and there's this like weird attraction between them that like she can't explain, and obviously because of that she can't fucking kill him. I think the worst part about all of this is that Adrian didn't even come to Isolde's kingdom with the intention of marrying her. He came to fully conquer them. It's only after he saw her in the woods, just like, ooh yes, pretty human, I must have her, that he comes up with the idea of the marriage proposal. I'm just like, what the fuck, you just met her. I do not understand the appeal of this trope at all. What happened to getting to know one another? Like, what the hell would he have done if she was just like the worst person to ever exist? Another big issue I have with this book is that it spoon feeds you information and it doesn't let you figure out anything by yourself. Like, there are a few instances where it tries to have like, ooh, big plot twist, oh my gosh, and I'd figured them out like 300 pages beforehand. It really just felt like the book was just like, hey, here's this huge plot twist coming up, you better act surprised when it actually does happen. It just feels like the author has no faith in me as a reader and essentially just calling me stupid. It honestly felt a bit insulting. I've essentially just been like summarizing this book to everyone as like the worst parts of From Blood and Ash, which is a series that I love, but like it definitely has its flaws, mixed with the ending of Kingdom of the Feared, and then those two bad things are like mixed into a blender and then came out with whatever the hell this was. Every time I think about this book, I like it less. So we're gonna move on. So here are the 5 best books that I read in 2024. And while normally I would only tell you my top 5, I only had 6 5-stars in 2024, so I'm just gonna tell you about all 6 of them so one doesn't get left out. In 6th place, which was my first 5-star of the year, and also my only For the Vibes 5-star, was The Deep Sky by Yume Kitase. For a bit of context, a For the Vibes 5-star for me is a book that definitely has flaws, and I see those flaws, but they were just kind of like overshadowed by all the good things about this book, so I didn't really care about the flaws. And that is what happened with this book. There are some like minor flaws that under other circumstances I probably wouldn't have rated this book 5-star, but like I didn't care. This was really fucking good. Essentially, this book follows 80 people in a spaceship on their quest to save humanity. Earth is doomed, so they're just gonna go colonize another planet to like rebuild the human race. However, halfway to their destination, the ship is bombed and knocked off course, and they do not have much time to figure out how to get it back on course before it's irreversible and they're kind of fucked. Oh, and our main character is the only surviving witness. I'm like 90% sure that this book is Among Us fanfiction. Like, there's just too many similarities for it to be a coincidence. I'm not complaining. I love that game. It's really fun. This book also has like a split timeline with our main character's time on the spaceship in the present day, and then also her time at Earth training for this mission. So there's like between 500 and 1,000 adolescent minds who are considered like some of the brightest kids on Earth, who are brought to this academy to kind of train for this mission. They were kind of whittled down from like 500 to 80 students, and our main character also barely made the cut. So like she deals with a lot of imposter syndrome throughout this book, which I think we can all relate to in one way or another. This book was also just like really easy to comprehend, and not like spoon feeding you the information kind of way, but just in a very like immersive, you feel like you're in the world kind of way. And that's a really good thing. I love it when that happens. In 5th place, which is my last 5-star of the year, which I read in October, is Unwind by Neil Chesterman. This book took me 9 days to figure out that it was a 5-star, and normally I like know what the rating's going to be as soon as I finish a book, so like that's a long time for me. This book is a YA dystopia that takes place after the Second American Civil War, which was fought over reproductive rights, and the consequences that stemming from that. To stop the fighting, a sort of compromise is made, in which life is considered inviolable from conception to the age of 13, but then from the ages of 13 to 18, a parent can choose to have their kid retroactively aborted, under the condition that their life doesn't technically end. Because you see, the term for this is unwinding, which is essentially a dissection. Unwinding is where all of the child's organs are transplanted into different donors. So technically their life doesn't end because pretty much every single bit of their body is reused and doesn't die. We have Connor, whose parents have decided that he is too out of control. We have Risa, who's a ward of the state, so she doesn't have parents and she's essentially found not talented enough to be kept alive. And most of the state wards do end up being unwound, so she just didn't beat the odds. And then we have Lev, who is what is known as a tithe, which are essentially kids that are conceived and raised specifically for unwinding. And this book follows them as they escape from their conditions and are just trying to survive in a world that only sees them as a commodity. I had 3 separate panic attacks while reading this book. We were having a great time. And then in 4th place, which is the very rare utter perfection romance novel, is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I don't know why I was surprised. Like, Ali Hazelwood is my favorite romance author for a reason. Anyways, our main character Rue is a biotech engineer who is starting a very promising career at a new food science company until there's a hostile takeover of the company, led by the guy who she just so happened to have gone on a blind date with like the night before. So naturally they start an affair, because I don't know what else you would do in that scenario. Every time that comes up in a book, I don't know why the characters always think that that's going to end well. Like, do romance books and movies just not exist in romance books? In 3rd place, we have my second 5-star of the year, which is a book that really snuck up on me, which was The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This book is an Arabian Nights retelling with an emphasis on Aladdin. Our main character Lily is a criminal who, with the help of her jinn bodyguard, hunts and sells illegal magic. Then she saves the life of a cowardly prince and gains the attention of his father, who blackmails her into retrieving something for him. It's an ancient lamp that is buried somewhere in the desert that has the power to kind of like revive the land at the cost of sacrificing every single living jinn. And of course nobody thinks that the extermination of an entire species is immoral, except for Lily, whose like best friend is a jinn, so like, what did the jinn do to deserve this? Like, in every single book that I read that has jinn in it, they're always 1, on the brink of extinction, and 2, everyone always fucking hates them. I'm genuinely asking if anyone has any answer for why everyone always hates the jinn, please tell me, because I am genuinely curious. This book is exactly what I needed when I read it. At the time I was coming out of my Ember and the Ashes reread, which is my favorite series of all time, and also a series that features jinn who are on the brink of extinction and everyone fucking hates them. I now have 2 books in my top 10 favorites that have something along the lines of that. Anyways, this book was perfect for my ADHD brain. It was super stimulating. There was always something happening. There were no stagnant bits where I like kind of like drifted off and got bored. It was very fun. For me, probably not as fun for the characters. And also every single character was so like complex and drawn out, and they felt like real living people. This book is the first in a trilogy, and the second book, The Ashfire King, comes out in April, and I cannot wait. Like, after the way this book ended, I need the sequel right now. In 2nd place, which was an anticipated 5-star, but somehow it still exceeded my expectations, was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is also the longest book that I have ever read in my entire life. Like, when I started this book, I knew it was going to be really fucking good because I've heard nothing but great things about it, but at the same time, I'm like, there's no way that this book is worth 1,000 pages. Yes, it is. Yep. I don't think I would have cut out a single word. I also don't think that I can summarize this book for the life of me, and I'm not even going to try, because the second that I do, I think my brain's just going to glitch out. Like, look at the size of that synopsis. There's no way I can summarize that into like 3 sentences. If you really like epic fantasy and heavy world building and all that stuff, then you're definitely going to like this. The second that I finished it, I desperately wanted to dive into Words of Radiance, but I had book club coming out, so I had to read that first, and now it's been 6 months, and I still haven't started the next book. And then the best book that I read all year, I read in May, and it was A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This was also an anticipated 5-star, and it also somehow still exceeded my expectations. This is a prequel to The Power of the Orange Tree, which is also a 5-star read, which is how I knew this was still going to be really fucking good. This takes place about 500 years before Priory during the Grief of Ages, or like, you know, like the second eruption of the Dreadmount. This book mainly follows 3 POV characters. In the south, we have Tanuva, who's a sister of the Priory, which is essentially an organization of women dedicated to eradicating the worms that erupted from the Dreadmount. And those are essentially like the fire-breathing, like westernized concept of a dragon. However, at the time the book starts, it's been about 500 years since the Priory was founded and about 500 years since the the last sighting of a worm. So a lot of the Sisters of the Priory are starting to see their mission as kind of pointless and don't understand what they're doing. And then we have Princess Glorian in the north on the island kingdom of Innis. She's kind of like the daughter of two worlds. Her mother is the Queen of Innis and the reigning monarch, and her dad is the King of Hroth, which based off of context, I'm guessing that Hroth is inspired by like Scandinavia. And then Innis is obviously the UK. All Glorian's mother really wants her to do is marry and have children and continue on their lineage, and Glorian does not want to do that. And then in the east on the island of Sekan, we have Dume, who lives atop a mountain trying to like awaken the gods. And the gods are essentially just the easternized concept of dragons, like more water-based and less chaotic. And then the Dread Mountain erupts again and throws the world into more chaos, which again is really fun for me, but not so much fun for the characters because, you know, like everyone's dying. This book fucking consumed me. I read it in 7 days while working full-time and not really having much time to read, so I was like severely sleep deprived for the week that I read this in. And I had the goal of reading it in 8 days. I had like these little like daily goal markers to like keep myself on track, and I ended up finishing a day early. And then the second that I finished it, I desperately wanted to reread Priory, but I had TBR Takeover coming up and I didn't have time to reread that book. And Samantha Shannon has a novella in this series coming out this year, which is another prequel to Priory, but in like the more near past. Anyways, those were the best and worst books that I read in 2024. The highs were super high, the lows were super low. I don't think I had quite as good of a reading year in 2024 as I did in 2023. Like 3 out of 5 of my top 5 favorite books ever were books that I read in 2023. 2 of the books that I read in 2024 are like the 2 worst books that I've read ever. And while my top 3 books of 2024 did make it onto my top 10 list ever, none of them made it into the top 5. However, while the lows were certainly low, the highs were certainly high, and I did ultimately enjoy my reading this year. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all that YouTube stuff, and also tell me your worst and best books that you read in 2024 because I do want to hear them. Anyways, that's it for me for today. I'm killing my voice and it really hurts, so I'm just gonna go.